Hello again, YouTube. So Theowarner uploaded a second challenge, um, asking us who our anti-hero is, who is a bad guy that we admire, um, who we see something noble in, and who is a bad guy who we could emulate. I've thought about this a lot, and I think um, I think that my answer has to be Leon Trotsky. Just has to be. Um, Trotsky was one of the most ruthless politicians and political figures that ever walked the face of the earth. Trotsky, if you don't know, he was Lenin's right-hand man. Um, in the establishment of Communist Russia in 1917 after the October Revolution. He was the head of the Red Army, or he was appointed at, to be a head of the Red Army. He was part of the Central Committee. He was the number two of of what would become Soviet Russia. Um, now, so obviously, talking about, I'm an American talking about an early, you know, Russian revolutionary. In some way, it's not hard to see um, that there are ethical problems. I mean, I think that we have such a bias surrounding the Russian Revolution that, like, I just need to say Trotsky, and there are many people in the country who will immediately um, react with horror at his name. Um, and I'll be the first to admit that he was a ruthless bastard. My favorite example is that in 1905 he tried to start a revolution in Russia and was exiled. Um, and he was in Europe meeting with other revolutionaries and I think he was a journalist at the time, and he met an anarchist, right? And the anarchists and the Marxists have a really contentious history with one another, particularly in the first half of the 20th century. Um, the Spanish Civil War might, just look at that, and you'll see the tensions between the communists and the anarchists. Um, but so Trotsky met an anarchist and became very good friends with him, and you can see there are correspondences that they had with one another where Trotsky is, you're my brother in arms, you're a great man, and etc. And then the October Revolution happens. Trotsky gets put in the position of being the number two of the Russian Revolution and the head of the Red Army and all of this. And his friend came to visit him, his anarchist friend, and Trotsky's, his one of his secretaries or something, somebody who worked directly under him, notified him, your friend is here, and he gave him his name. I don't remember the guy's name. Your friend is here, and Trotsky's response was kill him. So you can see there's just like a cold-blooded ruthlessness behind Trotsky. Will not deny it for a second. It was sort of the mark of the Bolshevik Party, something like a ruthless opportunism. Um, uh, and that's why Trotsky's that's the way in which he was a bad guy. So what do I see that's noble about Trotsky? Well, if there ever was a life in the past 200 years that Shakespeare would have written about, you know, that kind of dramatic, operatic life story, that again, it reads like a Shakespeare play. It's Leon Trotsky. I don't think anyone can deny that feature of him as well. He's a fascinating person, an intellectual. He signed the Surrealist Manifesto, took a year off from his duties to write literary criticism. A brilliant, brilliant, brilliant man, a brilliant speaker. Um, uh, One of the most cunning politicians. He's very similar um, to Thomas Jefferson in a certain way. I think that this is that Christopher Hitchens talks at length about both Trotsky and Thomas Jefferson, and I think that there is a sort of parallel between the two of them. And I can really understand why Hitchens is interested in both of them. But there's kind of a almost a cynical, cold politics wrapped up in one of the most brilliant minds you would ever encounter. And Trotsky is also an amazing writer. Like, I urge you to read his writings. His History of the Russian Revolution is known as being one of the best histories, and like a milestone in the writing of history. Um, his The Revolution Betrayed, which is a polemic against Stalinism, utterly incredible writing. Um, because, mind you, Stalin ran Trotsky out of the Soviet Union. Trotsky spent the end of his life in exile before being murdered. He spent his life running around writing polemics against Stalinism and writing, sort of organizing what would become known as left Marxist organizations. That is, Marxists who were against Stalin and were against authoritarian politics. They became known as Trotskyists, or, if you like, left-wing Marxists, whereas the Stalinist would be a right-wing Marxist. So Trotsky ran around the world writing letter after letter after letter. In some sense, the end of Trotsky's life is similar to St. Paul, just writing letters, urging people to do things, urging, like, for instance, if you read writing to the Communist Party in Germany when the rise of Hitler was happening, and the standard communist line about fascism was that it was the death throes of capitalism. It was the last move of capitalism, was the last place that the bourgeoisie could go, is into a hyper-fascism, to a hyper-authoritarianism to stave off the coming revolution. And there was a few attempted revolutions in Germany in the 20s. So that argument sort of looked like it had merit at a certain point. And Trotsky is writing to the Communist Party in Germany while Hitler is rising, saying, no, 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 like, you have to make common cause with the Social Democrats. You have to create a united front against Hitler and against the fascists. This is not the death throes of capitalism. This is something entirely new, and they will mow you over and kill all of you. In some sense, there's I've heard it referred to as the Cassandra effect. Trotsky knew what was happening in a way that he really, reading those letters, there's such a poetry about how far he could see in the future and how little he could do about it. Reading his writings to the Communist Party of Spain during the Spanish Civil War is equally fascinating. The man was just a brilliant theorist, and if you want somebody who lived and died for an ideal, somebody who really, like, was a boots on the ground revolutionary, who dedicated his soul and his life and all of his passion to the realization of a better world, that was Trotsky. The key word here is passion. The key idea is commitment. To a degree, like, you don't. If you read about the life of Trotsky and you watch, for instance, the Obama-Romney debates, you see this, like, exactly how impotent American politics is. Um, Trotsky conceived of it all as a life or death situation that he had to throw all of himself into, which became the basis, that became the rationalization for his more ruthless and cold and cynical moments in his life. Um, uh, it's not quite convincing to me. In some sense, it's a very similar story to Che Guevara, but I think Trotsky is the more compelling figure, because he was such a genius, um, um, and just such like a poetic soul. um, in some way, I am so attracted to him as a historical figure, and at the same time, I'm so repulsed at myself for being so enamored with a man of such violence. Um, and yeah, like that contradiction in his personality is what does it for me. So yeah, that's my anti-hero, Leon Trotsky. And I look forward to all of your answers as well. Have a good day.